Montana Territory, September 1882, the first shot cracked through the trees like dry bones snapping, and Vayla Kessler's heart kicked hard against her ribs as she ran, skirt torn, boots slick with mud, breath sharp in her throat. She did not look back, branches clawed at her arms. The low sun bled gold over the edge of the pines, but she only saw the shadows of the men chasing her. She had seen one of their faces. That was enough to sign her death. A second shot rang out closer. She stumbled down a ravine, slipped, rolled, then scrambled to her feet, her fingers bleeding. Her lungs burned with the cold air, and her braid had come loose, whipping across her face. She pushed through the brush, heart thudding louder than anything else. Then she saw him. A man stood by a black horse at the edge of the clearing, rifle slung over his shoulder, hat low over his eyes. Tall, solid, with a lean strength in the way he held himself. He looked up just as she burst through the thicket. "Please," she gasped, her voice breaking. "They're chasing me," he moved without asking a single question. He reached for the rifle. "Get down," he said. She dropped to her knees as the next shot came. He fired once, twice. Then again, and then he took the bullet meant for her. Vayla saw it hit his shoulder, jerking back, blood blooming across his shirt. He staggered, caught himself on the saddle, and stayed standing. Something broke in her chest. "You got to run," he said, voice tight with pain. "No," she said, rising to her feet. "I am not leaving you." The men were retreating now, their shapes vanishing through the trees. Maybe they thought he was dead, maybe they would be back. Vayla did not care. She ran to him, caught him as he sagged to one knee. "You saved me," she whispered. He looked at her, eyes clouded with pain but steady. "You look like you needed saving," she gripped his hand. "Then let me save you back." He gave a short nod. "Name's Yoren Thatch." "Vayla Kessler," she said, tightening her hold on his hand. "And I swear to you, Yoren, I will stand beside you." "I promise." He blinked at her like he did not expect that, then he tried to smile. "You always promise that to strangers, only the ones who take bullets for me," she said, and slipped her shoulder under his arm. "Come on. We are not dying today." They moved slow, Yoren half leaning on her, gritting his teeth against the pain. She got him to his horse, helped him into the saddle, then climbed up behind him, her arms around his waist. His blood soaked into her sleeve. "Where are we going?" he asked. "There's a homestead 3 miles west," she said. "Abandoned, I know it." "You hiding from someone?" "I was," she said. "Now I am not alone." They reached the cabin by dusk. It was small and rough, but still standing. She helped him down, got him inside, and laid him on the cot. He bit down on a folded cloth as she dug the bullet out and stitched him, hands steady even though her entire body trembled. He passed out halfway through. Vayla worked by lantern light. She boiled water, cleaned the wound, and wrapped it tight. She stayed by his side all night, listening to the sound of his breathing, her fingers curled around his. In the morning, he woke to her sleeping beside the cot, head resting on her arms. "Vayla," she opened her eyes fast, sat up. "You are awake." "That you?" he asked hoarsely. "Or am I dead already?" She smiled. "You are very much alive." He looked at her, really looked. "You stayed." "I told you I would." He gave a long breath. "You did." She helped him sit up, brought him water, her touch gentle but sure. He drank, wincing. "You know how to patch a man up." "My father was a doctor," she said, "back in St. Louis." "What brought you here?" he asked. "Trouble," she said. "Same as most," he nodded. "Those men, why were they chasing you?" "I saw them kill a boy in town. They thought I ran off quiet." "I did not." She lifted her chin. "I went to the sheriff, but they got there first." Yoren's jaw worked. "You did the right thing." "Well, you took a bullet for me," she said. "That makes us even." He chuckled, then winced. "That is not how bullets work." She smiled. "Then I guess I owe you." They stayed at the cabin for 4 days. Yoren's fever broke on the second night. By the 5th morning he could stand, though he moved slow. They took turns gathering wood, cooking beans, sitting outside in the evening when the light turned soft. Vayla caught herself watching him, how he moved, how quiet he was, how careful. There was loss in his eyes, though he never spoke of it, and she knew something about that. "You have someone waiting?" she asked once as they sat on the porch. "No," he said. "Used to, not anymore." She nodded. "Me neither." He looked at her. You got family, a daughter, she said softly. Leora, she is 7. I sent her away before they came after me. She is safe, with a family I trust in Helena. Yoren's face changed, something deeper behind his eyes. You are a mother. I am. You fought like hell for her. I would do it again. He reached out, touched her hand. His fingers were rough, warm. You are not alone anymore. She looked down at their hands. Neither are you. They left the cabin on the 6th day, riding west. The men who had chased her were gone, but the danger still sat heavy behind them. They rode quiet, the wind in the grass, the sun on their backs. By the time they reached Helena, Yoren's wound had healed enough for him to ride without pain. They found Leora safe with the widow Harland, a stern woman with a kind heart. The little girl threw herself into Vayla's arms, clinging tight. Yoren stood back, watching until Vayla turned and said, "Come meet my daughter." He stepped forward slow, unsure. Vayla took his hand. "Leora," she said, "this is Yoren. He is the reason I came back to you." The girl looked up serious-eyed. "Did you protect my mama?" He crouched down, nodding. "Tried my best." Leora studied him. Then she hugged him, small arms tight around his neck. Vayla's eyes filled with tears. That night, as the stars came out over the hills, Yoren stood with her on the porch, Leora asleep inside. "You could stay," Vayla said, voice quiet. He looked at her. "You sure about that?" She nodded. He took her hand again. "I never wanted to belong anywhere," he said. "Until now," she leaned in, forehead against his. "Then stay with me, with her." He kissed her, slow, certain, like he had been waiting his whole life for this, and she kissed him back, heart full. They stood there a long time, hands clasped, breath mingling. He took a bullet when she was chased. She took his hand and promised to stand forever beside him. And she did. The snow came early to the Helena Valley that year, dry, powdery flakes that sifted down in the hours before dawn, softening the world into quiet. Yoren rose before the cold light had touched the windows, careful not to wake the child in the next room. The floor creaked under his step, but Leora slept through it, one hand curled beneath her cheek as if in trust. He stepped outside, boots crunching through the thin layer of snow. The air bit sharp against his skin, but it cleared his head. The mountains to the west lay gray and still beneath a pale sky, the light just beginning to stretch across the ridgelines. Vayla joined him not long after, her shawl wrapped tight, her breath visible in the cold. "You always up this early?" she asked, her voice low but unhurried. He glanced sideways at her. "Used to be, back when I worked with stock, hard habit to break." "Do you miss it?" "No," he said after a pause. "Some pieces of it, maybe, the quiet." "Knowing the land," she nodded, rubbing her hands together. "I miss things too, not what I came from, but what I thought I'd find." Yoren studied her face. There were lines at the corners of her eyes, not from age, but from endurance. "What did you think you'd find?" "Something steady," she said. "Something worth building a life around." He looked at her a long moment. "You think you have that now?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she stepped off the porch and walked to the fence line where the snow had dusted the posts silver. He followed. "I think it's starting to grow," she said. "It's just quiet, like roots." They worked through the morning chopping wood, stacking it beneath the lean-to Yoren had repaired with fresh nails and cedar planks. Vayla's hands moved with practiced rhythm, unbothered by the cold. Yoren admired the way she moved, unhurried, capable, focused, not a single wasted motion. "Leora's going to need shoes soon," she said, tossing a split log on the pile. "Feet grow faster with peace, I've noticed." He straightened, wiping his palms on his trousers. "There's a cobbler over near the creekside street. I can walk into town tomorrow, take the measurements." "I'll come with you," she said. "She'll want to pick the laces herself." That afternoon, they sat in the lean sun while Leora traced shapes in the frost with a stick. She hummed under her breath, a tune neither of them recognized. Yoren leaned back against the porch rail. "She seems lighter now." "She is," Vayla said. "She used to wake up crying, not since we got here. You ever think about moving on, somewhere else?" She shook her head. "No. I want to plant something that lasts, not just keep surviving." His gaze lingered on her. "Then I'll stay with you, long as you'll have me." She turned to him, her eyes steady. "I didn't ask you to stay out of pity, Yoren. I know. I asked because I saw the way you looked at her." "Like she mattered." "She does," he said. "Same as you." Later that week, the widow Harland stopped by with a tin of molasses cookies and word from town. She lingered on the porch, glancing from Yoren to Vayla, something thoughtful in her expression. "Folks are talking," she said. "Some of them not kind." Vayla stood tall. "Let them." Yoren met her gaze. "We're not doing anything wrong." "No," the widow said, "you're not, but I know how this town works. People remember what they want to." She handed the tin to Leora, then looked back at Vayla. "Just be sure you're building something that can weather the wind." After she left, Yoren sat with his back to the hearth, turning her words over in his head. "You worried about what they say?" Vayla asked. "I've never cared much for town talk, but you're thinking on it." He nodded slightly. "I just want to make sure you and Leora are safe, that I'm not putting you in the way of anything." "You saved my life," she said. "That put you in the way of it the minute you stepped into that clearing." He looked down at his hands. "Then I want to be here for the rest of it, too." She crossed the room, set her hand on his shoulder. He leaned into her touch. "We'll weather it together," she said. That night, Leora fell asleep with her hand tucked in his, curled on the floor beside the hearth. Vayla sat across from him, sewing a patch onto his shirt. Her fingers worked by instinct, her mouth quiet. "Did you ever think you'd settle like this?" she asked, not looking up. "No," he said, "but I'm not the man I used to be." She met his eyes. "Neither am I." He reached across the space between them, touched her knee lightly. She didn't flinch. "We're not running anymore," he said. "No," she answered, setting the sewing aside. "We're staying." He leaned in, and she met him halfway. No words, no promises, just warmth. "Just breathe." Outside, the snow thickened. Inside, the fire held strong. By late October, the ground had hardened, and the wind came sharpening down from the north, thin and sharp through the cottonwoods. The days folded into each other, steady and unhurried, but the quiet held weight, not the kind that threatened, but the kind that asked for something deeper. Yoren had begun carving small things in the evenings: a spoon for Leora's porridge, a handle for the kettle lid, a horse with crooked legs that made her laugh when he handed it over without ceremony. He'd worked with his hands long before he'd ever held a rifle, and there was a comfort in it now that surprised him. "Why don't you say much about where you were before?" Vayla asked one evening, her voice low as she mended the worn hem of Leora's winter coat. The girl was asleep on a pallet tucked near the stove, her breath even, her curls damp across her brow. "Because I don't want it to follow me here," he said, running the back of his knife along the edge of the spoon. "Some things keep breathing if you name them out loud." She glanced at him, needle paused mid-stitch. "You think silence kills them?" "Not always," he said. "But it slows them down." She didn't press him, but the question lingered between them, not unwelcome. He looked up after a while, the firelight catching the side of her face. "I worked freight along the Ruby River," he said. "Before that, cattle drives down out of Miles City. I was good at what didn't require sticking around." She nodded once, resumed her stitching. "And now," he watched her fingers move, "now I want to see the same faces when I wake up. That's new." The next morning, Vayla took Leora into town to visit the schoolhouse. The teacher there, Miss Arlen, had only just arrived from Illinois and was still learning the names of the local ranching families. Yoren stayed behind to finish repairing the fence gate. The wind had torn it partway loose during the last storm, and the latch had gone crooked. By the time they returned, the horses were stabled and the light had turned soft with the coming dusk. Leora ran ahead, cheeks pink, clutching a folded paper with careful letters drawn in uneven rows. "She wrote her name," Vayla said, stepping down from the wagon. "All by herself." Yoren crouched beside the girl, taking the paper with calloused hands. "That's so?" he asked. Leora nodded, eyes bright. "I want to write yours next." "You'll have to tell me how it turns out," he said, handing it back. "Never seen my name look like yours before." Later, as she warmed herself by the fire, Vayla joined Yoren in the barn, where the lantern swung gently from its peg, casting long shadows across the hay. "She's taken to you," she said, arms folded against the cold. "She's a good kid," he said. "Not many would have made it through what she did without folding." "She's strong," Vayla said. "She won't say it, but she still checks the windows when the wind gets loud." He turned to face her. "What about you?" "I don't check the windows," she said. "I check the doors." He stepped closer. I've got no plans to let anything through them. She looked up at him, eyes unreadable but full. I know. They stood there a long time without moving. When she reached for his hand, it was without hesitation. I need to ask you something, she said. Go ahead. If you're really staying, then I don't want you sleeping in the barn anymore. He didn't answer right away. The lantern's light caught the curve of her jaw. You sure? He asked. I don't say things I'm not. He nodded once. Then I'll bring my things in tomorrow. She nodded in return. Good. They went back to the house together, her shoulder brushing his once as they passed through the doorway. That night she left the door between their rooms open, not wide, just enough. And when the fire went low and the wind picked up again, he heard her whisper, "You were never just passing through." He didn't answer out loud, but he didn't close the door either. The lake froze in mid-November, thin glass along the banks, thickening deeper where the birches leaned out over the water. Yoren took Leora out one morning with a saw and a sled, teaching her how to cut blocks for the ice house. She crouched beside the sled, watching the blade move, her face sharp with interest, not play. She doesn't ask questions like most children, he said that evening, wiping his hands on the rag by the hearth. She listens until she knows what matters, Vayla answered, turning the bread out of the pan. Then she asks. He leaned against the doorframe, watching her slice the loaf. She's got your steadiness. She didn't always, she said. She grew it. The next day, Vayla walked to the Cooper's house with a basket of dried apples and a favor to return. She left Leora with the Harlans, not wanting her to wait in the cold. Yoren offered to go in her place, but she shook her head. I want to be seen, she said, adjusting her scarf. Not hidden. She came back with a red welt on her cheek and a silence he didn't press. She set the basket on the table, emptied of fruit, and hung her coat on the nail by the stove. I asked him to fix the barrel, she said. He told me it wasn't proper, me speaking for a man's house. Yoren stood slowly. You want me to go back there? No, she said. I want to finish the work myself. He didn't argue. Instead, he brought the tools from the barn and laid them out on the table. She worked through the evening, measuring the iron hoops, hammering with short, controlled strikes. He sat beside her, handing her what she needed, not guiding, not interrupting. You ever think about marrying again? She asked, eyes on the wood. Sometimes, he said. More lately. If you had, what kind of woman would you have looked for? He turned the hoop in his hands. One who knew what it cost to keep going, one who didn't flinch from hard days. She didn't look up. Not softer, no, he said, kinder. The next week, the snow came hard and fast. The drift stacked against the barn doors, and the wind screamed down from the mountains like it had teeth. They stayed inside for 2 days, burning through wood faster than they'd planned. Yoren taught Leora how to tie knots for the oil lamp wicks. Vayla showed her how to stretch the flour into biscuits when the larder ran low. The girl took it all in without complaint, her shoulders squared like she understood the weight of every small task. That third evening, when the wind finally eased, Yoren came inside with a new scar along the back of his hand, fresh from the edge of the axe head. You're bleeding, Vayla said, crossing the room fast. He held still while she cleaned the cut with boiled water, her touch exact. I didn't notice, he said. You notice everything, she said. You just didn't care. He watched her wrap the cloth around his hand. You ever going to ask me what I lost before I came here? No, she said, but you can tell me if you're ready. He looked down at her hands. There was a woman. In Fort Benton, her name was Clara. She died of lung rot 2 winters back. We weren't married, but we meant to be. I left after she passed. Vayla didn't interrupt. She carried a child once. We lost that too. Vayla tied the knot on the bandage. You carry them with you still? Not like I used to, he said. More like they walk beside me now. She met his eyes. Then let them walk, but don't let them block your road forward. That night, she set a second pillow on her bed without words. He saw it when he came in to bank the fire. She didn't speak, just held his gaze until he stepped inside and closed the door behind him. They lay quiet, not touching at first, the space between them warm with trust rather than heat. He turned toward her after a long time, resting his forehead to hers. I won't leave unless you send me, he said. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. In the dark, their fingers found each other. Not urgent, just certain. Outside, the snow kept falling, but the wind had gone still. The first signs of thaw came quiet, clearer daylight, the drip of meltwater off the eaves, the sound of birds testing the morning air. Vayla noticed it when she stepped outside with the wash basin and found the snow had softened underfoot. It clung wet to the soles of her boots, but she could smell the earth underneath. Inside, Yoren was bent over the hearth, coaxing heat from the last of the seasoned pine. He looked up when she came in, the light catching faint gold in the dark of his beard. "There's runoff in the creek," she said, setting the basin down. "We'll need to check the back fence before it shifts." "I'll go this afternoon," he said. "You've done more than enough this week." She tugged off her gloves. "I can still work." "I know." "Doesn't mean you have to do it alone." When she looked at him, her face changed not toward softness but toward ease. She'd stopped waiting for him to disappear. He'd stopped expecting to. That afternoon, with Leora helping Widow Harlan prepare for the spring gathering in town, Vayla and Yoren rode out along the south ridge. The frost had left the soil spongy, and the fence posts leaned where the ground had heaved beneath them. Yoren swung down and tested a post with his boot. "We'll have to dig these deeper come spring proper, maybe build up the slope." "We'll need more lumber," Vayla said. "I can ride out to the mill next week." "I'll go." He squinted against the sun. "You've walked farther than you needed to most of your life," she dismounted, brushing dust from her skirt. "I didn't know anything else. You do now." They worked until the light began to drop behind the hills, setting the post straighter with temporary braces. When they paused, Vayla leaned against the rail and looked out across the land-rounded hills, patches of snow glinting under bare cottonwoods, the distant line of the creek glimmering like a blade. "You think you could stay here," she said, "if it was just this, no chase." "No fight. I want that more than I ever thought I could," he said. She turned toward him, the wind tugging loose strands of her hair. "Then I want it with you." He stepped close enough that she could feel the warmth of his breath, but he didn't touch her yet. "I've been waiting to ask something. Been waiting until it didn't feel like I still had blood on my hands. You don't have to wait anymore. I want to marry you, Vayla." She didn't blink. "Then let's do it." They wed the following Sunday under the open sky behind the Harlan house. The preacher from town brought a worn Bible and a steady voice, and Widow Harlan set out boiled eggs and molasses bread on a pinewood table. Leora wore a green ribbon in her braid and stood between them, hands held by both. Yoren wore his best shirt. Vayla wore a blue dress she'd let out twice to fit a stronger frame. When the preacher asked the question, Yoren didn't hesitate. "I will," he said, looking at her like there was nothing in the world but her face. Her voice didn't waver. "I will." They didn't kiss in front of the crowd. They waited until the sun was low, the guests gone, and Leora asleep with her hands wrapped around the new wooden horse he'd carved for her. Then, alone in the quiet house, Yoren stepped close and traced his fingers along Vayla's jaw. "You still sure?" he asked, voice quiet but certain. "I've never been more." She kissed him slowly, the kind of kiss that wasn't born of urgency but of knowing. Of every day they'd crossed to get here. Of every silence they'd shared and every promise they hadn't needed to say out loud. That night he laid beside her and didn't wake with ghosts. That night she didn't check the doors. In the weeks that followed, they rebuilt the back fence with new cedar rails. Yoren started a garden plot where the soil held sun longer. Vayla taught Leora how to read seed packets and mix lye soap. They rode into town together, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Yoren built a bench for the front porch. Vayla planted sweet peas in a clean line below the windowsill. In June, Leora turned 8. She asked to keep her last name, and Yoren said, "Of course you can." "You're exactly who you're meant to be." Vayla watched them from the doorway, her hands still damp from kneading bread, and knew she'd stopped surviving. She was alive now, fully, deeply, with two people who called her home. That fall, Yoren built a cradle. Not because they needed it yet, but because they would. He didn't say anything when he started. Just sanded the wood smooth and set it by the hearth where the firelight could catch it in the evenings. When Vayla saw it, she pressed her palm to the curved edge and smiled. She didn't need to ask. He didn't need to explain. They were building a life. Every piece of it was earned, and nothing in it was borrowed.